Okay, so this is some freeform thoughts. I was watching Nichijou. I guess I'll edit in something right over here, like a motion graphic or something. And it's like this pretty light-hearted anime about like anime girls hanging out, but not in a creepy way. Actually, I really like about the shows that's very it's like non-sexual. They're just they're just treated like the kids that they are, which I know is a crazy take for anime. But yeah, so I was watching it. I watched a show years and years ago. It's got this very over-the-top animation style, super super like visually interesting. Like considering how old it is, I feel like it still holds up, like even compared to like the Jujutsu Kaisens of today. But what I found interesting on this rewatch is that I've been learning a lot about religion over the years. Studying world religions, ancient religions, indigenous religions, and I found that through like a religious spiritual context, I feel like there's some hidden depth to Nichijou. And it's really like, I'm not gonna say watch this to learn about like Buddhism or whatever, but also like it's a fun show. It's like the show I watch to unwind and not think about anything. So I guess the biggest thing that comes through to me is the idea of like the middle path in Buddhism. Like the original Buddha, he Gautama, I'm definitely mispronouncing his name, but he starts as this super rich king, and he not a rich king like a rich prince, and he realizes that the life is kind of meaningless, and he forsakes it to join there's like a religious group where a lot of religions really, but there's one specific one that's kind of adjacent to Buddhism that again I don't remember the name of, so maybe I'll put it in editing, that really values restriction, right, and living as scarcely as possible. So he tries that for many years, living like on the poverty line. He realizes, you know what, this fucking sucks too. And then he finds the middle path where he ends up working at like a boat dock, as a sort of like the guy who lets the boats cross. And it's here where he really hits this Zen point, where he realizes not that there's no meaning, but that maybe it's enough to be content with what we already have. And that's kind of what the middle path is about. It's not about sacrificing everything and being as harsh on yourself as possible. And at the same time, it's not about living lavishly just for the sake of living lavishly. It's about finding this contentedness in the middle, where you're kind of meeting your human desires, but also kind of expressing a sort of creativity or deep thought. And I think a lot of the characters in Nichijou express that. Like there's references to like Indonesian culture, and there's this one character, Mei, who's always like making statues of Buddha. Like Buddha is specifically brought out many times, and you see all the characters do take this middle path, right? Like it's exaggerated, their response and reaction to the situation, but at the core of all these characters is just kind of like a Zen of like, this is who I am, this is the life I have, and even these seemingly human, unenlightened reactions are a part of this level of enlightenment that the characters in Nichijou have achieved, that of like a full acceptance, even the acceptance of the desire to reach acceptance, and how that desire in and of itself makes it impossible to truly be free of desire. It's kind of a little mind fuck. It's just like an infinite layer of exception till you're nothing and your mind is just kind of blank, and it all flows through, and you're like, yeah, this is the moment, right? This is like the moment that I have right now, the life that I have right now. And I find it really interesting that you can read it in that way. And then I guess to close it off, Nichijou, it's kind of like a bunch of short clips, like a bunch of short like comedy skits with like a slightly overarching story, and it has these like interludes, where it kind of shows just like random scenes from around town, and the style is really beautiful. It gives a very kind of like nostalgic Ghibli feeling. And there's this one interlude that goes on for a bit. It shows like an elevator going up and down, and it's empty. And I don't know why, but I always kept thinking about that scene. I was like, okay, what are they trying to communicate here? Like, this is just a really kind of bizarre thing to keep showing. I don't understand. But then a woman gets on it, and the elevator goes up, and she gets off, and she walks towards the light or whatever. And I think you see where I'm going with this, is that that's kind of like what the world is. It's like if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, doesn't make a sound. Like the world is moving, and the systems and the cogs are moving. The elevator is moving from your current life to death and the afterlife, if you believe in that. And that's, I think, the point I was trying to make. And I guess my final point, I'm gonna have to probably edit this a bit if it's not making too much sense. My final point would be that in its absurdism, it really emphasizes, I guess, a point about like how absurd life really is. Like the things we take for granted. Like there's a scene where one of the characters, who's even younger than the other characters, she's like a little sister type, they're like being attacked by dogs. Not really attacked by dogs, they're like scared of dogs. She's like, oh my god, the dogs are gonna eat me, and if the dogs eat me, then I can't eat food anymore, or something stupid like that. And it makes me kind of think about like humans when we ponder the afterlife and the metaphysical. We're like, to the gods, to the deities, to the unity, the divinity, whatever it is, we are just children, right? Like we have these worries and these concerns and they seem so serious, but we're not really different from this little girl character in the anime being like, oh, I'm worried about XYZ, but the basis of our understanding of what comes after is based on what is already in the universe, right? Which I feel like is inherently limited. And that's something I've been grappling with, is that, like, for me, what the gods represent, what the divinities, the deities, the demons, the evolution of religion over human history, what that represents to me is something better, because humans fucking suck, you know? We just sit around killing each other for a variety of reasons, and they all suck, and we just hate each other for no fucking reason. And for me, the discovery of faith during a hard time in my life was like, maybe there's something better out there, right? Like, maybe there is a perfect beings, whatever, that are out there that are watching us, and, you know, they give us freedom, but they're also, you know, hopefully guiding the world in the right direction, or just, you know, it's like maybe there's perfection out there. And in the school of Christian mysticism, which I've kind of resonated with a bit, like, this has gone on to be a much longer rant about religion. Yeah, in the school of Christian mysticism, you know, a lot of, like, people who are ordained, like, ministers, and obviously not the Pope, but, like, to get to that level of being, like, a minister, or, like, within the inner circle is a bishop. Probably not a bishop, but something along those lines. Like, a decent amount of their life has been dedicated to it. They believe in this idea of Christian mysticism and the idea of, you know, like, divine experiences and revelations and that sort of thing. Even if you look at, like, the prophets in the Bible, or like the shamans in ages past, there is that kind of element of mysticism, of like, this divine experience, especially like in medieval times, for instance. Like, there was a lot of divine experience, right? People would, like, have, even today, they have, like, the gods in my body, and they're shaking, and they're having all the blah 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 blah. So, you know, some in Christian thought there is that kind of idea, like mysticism, understanding God's experience more through a personal experiential perspective than through another one. And they talk about this idea of, like, because God is greater than us, right? In fact, God is greater than the universe. So it's like God is like the cup, and we're the water. And I guess God is also the water too, right? Like, we can't understand the cup because it's beyond the bound of our conception. God is, like, all encompassing, a part of us yet separate at the same time, is kind of my read of it. And, you know, I got a lot of hate for my last video talking about my religious beliefs, which I find bizarre, because I love, I don't know, whatever. I'm not gonna argue with you, but I will draw your attention to a couple Old Testament Bible passages. So one, I would say, is the story of Cain and Abel. Now, if you've actually studied the Bible a bit in depth, maybe, you know, in a very specific way, is that in Eden specifically, we are told that Adam and Eve are vegetarians, right? And that kind of carries over when Adam has his two sons, Cain and Abel. They are taught to be vegetarians. That's literally what God in Eden was like: be a fucking vegetarian, right? Don't eat meat or whatever. But Abel ends up, you know, growing animals, killing animals, using them for clothing and food or whatever. Whereas Cain just follows the teachings, right? He's like, yeah, you know, so my father taught me I'm supposed to make vegetables and whatever. And it comes to the point at the end of the story, right before Cain kills Abel, where they're making their offerings to God, right? Cain has followed the rules that he has been taught his whole life. He hasn't tried to better himself or whatever. He's just kind of be like, okay, this is what I was told, therefore it is right, and I do it. Abel, on the other hand, has actually kind of broken the rules a bit, right? Like, he's been growing and killing animals, which, per, you know, perfect Eden, you think God wouldn't be happy. But if you read the passage, you know what fucking happens? God comes down, he's like, Abel, I love your sacrifice, your offering, it is of meaning to me. And he doesn't reward Cain. And then Cain kills Abel out of jealousy and rage, and it's the first murder, and blah 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 blah. And, you know, my reading of that story is that an element of defiance from societal norms isn't something that God frowns upon. You know, isn't God about righteousness? Would you say that Martin Luther King invoking God against the greater powers of the time for righteous anger was wrong? Fundamentally, I feel like Christianity is like a slave religion. You know, there's a reason why, like, the African diaspora can fucking relate to the stories of Jesus turning over the tables of the moneylenders and sending the plagues on Egypt, because guess what? They were the people in the Bible that God helps were those who were marginalized and pushed down. And he's like, yeah, the shit's fucked. I'm gonna come down, lay some righteous anger, right? But whatever. Most people don't really get that reading for some reason. And I'm gonna say one more thing. I'm probably gonna cut up this video. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I was looking into older translations of the Bible, right? Because if you look at the history of the Bible, and the reason why I think there's so much conflict over the Bible is that it is man-made, right? Like, not to say that the prophet wasn't chosen by God and that he didn't have divine knowledge, but that it was filtered through humans. Even in early Christianity, there were multiple sects vying over what passages should be put in, what passages should not be put in, and the text has evolved over the years, right? So at one of these earlier texts, and I found this through like a Bible study forum, like these kind of like biblical scholar types, there's the story of the 5 talents, which if you're watching this with outrage, and I'm sure you are, you know the story of the 5 talents. But there's an earlier translation of it, which I think you'll find interesting. So a talent back in those times was like a big sum of money, right? And I guess you can kind of like, oh, I guess it's like my innate talent nowadays, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But a slave master gives to his slaves 1 talent, 3 talents, 5 talents before he goes on a trip. And the slave with 1 talent, he buries it. The slave with 3 talents, he invests it. And in the passage that most people know, the 5 talent guy also invests it. But in the earlier reading, you will see that what the 5 talents guy does is he uses it to buy like booze and sex workers or whatever, right? And then God comes back, not God, but the slave master in this analogy is like a metaphor for God. He comes back and he says, the slave who buried your talents, you go underground to hell, to the prison, whatever. The guy who invested is like, yeah, good job. But to the 5th slave who follows his heart, and he lives freely, he makes mistakes, he's obviously maybe not the best person ever. The slave master is like, you are a free man now, right? And what's really struck me in the biblical passages that I've found, that I've read, is this element of like defiance, of breaking against the societal norm to do what's good for you, of righteousness. And I think that gets lost a lot, and that's why a lot of progressives turn away from religion, because it becomes like this fundamentalist tool for beating in existing conservative values. Lest we forget that slave owners were not too long ago using the Bible as justification. That's not it. You're misinterpreting it. Like, seriously, like, what do you think Jesus was doing when he was approving of sex workers and when he was helping the lepers and helping the marginalized, forgotten people? It feels like people forget that these days. Maybe I'm against the institution of religion, but I feel like the Bible, many religious texts, religions throughout the world, are of significance, of importance. They teach us kindness, they teach us empathy, they teach us to believe in something greater than ourselves that'll guide us in the right direction. But instead, people mostly just use it to hate on minorities and like queer people or whatever, right? That's not even true. That's not even true. Like, I would say, like, I have many religious friends of all varieties, and I would say most of them are not assholes. Maybe it's just people on the internet who are assholes. I don't know. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I feel like I had something else to say, but I can't remember. Yeah, this went from Nichijou into a long fucking thing. Yeah. Please comment more so I can get more engagement if you're angry. Okay, thank you.